Hello again. I'd like to address some of the wrong ideas that are being propagated by the anti-racism movement that's taking place right now in our country. Uh, I looked at the idea that we are all different races. According to the Bible, we are only one race, only one race. There's a great deal of variety within that race, but we are all one race, and that's the foundation of our equality. The fact that we are all made in God's image, we all come from the same person, is that we're all equal. Second idea I want to attack is the idea of what is called inherited guilt. I had somebody give me a book a while back that detailed particularly the evangelical church and its various events or in the past where it was guilty of racism. That went back into colonial days with some of the leaders back there and who owned slaves or owned a plantation. And also part of what this book taught was if you did not voice an opposition to slavery or racism, then you are guilty of supporting racism because you didn't say anything. That I'm going to attack or look at in a different video coming up here. But particularly this one, that we now have inherited guilt because of previous Christians or church activity or anyone in our white race that may have been racist. We have inherited their guilt, and we are guilty for racism because they were. And I want to address that inherited guilt, and particularly the great passage in the Bible to show that there's no such thing as inherited guilt is in Ezekiel chapter 18. So let me read a little bit of that to you. Then the word of the Lord came to me, saying, "What do you mean by using this proverb concerning the land of Israel, saying, the fathers eat the sour grapes, but the children's teeth are set on edge?" Now, the idea of this little proverb is that the father eats sour grapes, and the result of their eating this is felt by the children. The children have a sour taste in their mouth, and their teeth are set on edge because of what their parents have done. And the idea is that the children inherit the guilt of the parents. He continues, "As I live, declares the Lord, you are surely not going to use this proverb in Israel anymore. Behold, all souls are mine. The soul of the Father as well as the soul of the Son is mine. The soul who sins will die. But if a man is righteous and practices justice and righteousness, and does not eat at the mountain shrines, or lift up his eyes to the idols of the house of Israel, or defile his neighbor's wife, or approach a woman, if a man does not oppress anyone, but restores to the debtor his pledge, does not commit robbery, but gives his bread to the hungry, and covers the naked with clothing, if he does not lend money on interest, or take increase, if he keeps his hand from iniquity, and executes true justice between man and man, if he walks in my statutes and my ordinances as to deal faithfully, he is righteous and will surely live, declares the Lord. Then he may have a violent son who sheds blood and who does any of the things to a brother, though he himself did not do any of these things. That is, he even eats at the mountain shrines and defiles his neighbor's wife, oppresses the poor and needy, commits robbery, does not restore a pledge, but lifts up his eyes to the idols and commits abomination. He lends money on interest and takes increase. Will he live? He will not live. He has committed all these abominations. He will surely be put to death. His blood will be on his own head. Now behold, he has a son who has observed all his father's sins which he committed, and observing does not do likewise. He does not eat at the mountain shrines, or lift up his eyes to the idols or the house of Israel, or defile his neighbor's wife, or so on and so forth. As for his father, because he practiced extortion, robbed his brother, and did what was not good among his people, behold, he will die for his iniquity. Yet you say, why should the son not bear the punishment for the father's iniquity? When the son has practiced justice and righteousness, and observed all my statutes, and done them, he will surely live. The person who sins will die. The son will not bear the punishment of the father's iniquity, nor will the father bear the punishment for the son's iniquity. The righteousness of the righteous will be upon himself, and the wickedness of the wicked will be upon himself. And this is not just in Ezekiel, it's also written in Jeremiah 31 when he talks about the new covenant coming. He says, "In those days you will not say again, the fathers have eaten sour grapes, and the children's teeth are set on edge. But everyone will die for their own iniquity. Each man who eats sour grapes, his teeth will set on edge." And this has been around forever in the covenant with Moses and between Moses, Israel, and God. We find this in Deuteronomy chapter 24, when the law is repeated again. Verse 16, "Fathers shall not be put to death for their sons, nor shall sons be put to death for their fathers. Everyone shall be put to death for his own sin." And the idea is we only bear guilt for what we do. We do not inherit guilt. God does not pass guilt on from one person to another person. Now, usually those that object to this will actually quote this passage from Exodus chapter 20 when God gives the 10 Commandments. And here's the passage. "You shall not worship them or serve them." This is other gods or goddesses. "For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children, on the third and the fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing loving kindness to thousands, to those who love me and keep my commandments." And so it appears that there is a passing on of guilt here. But notice some things here. First of all, God is the one that does this. And he does this as he decides, passing on the sins from the children of the fathers to the children. Not necessarily the guilt, but the sins, the action of sins. Sometimes maybe guilt. And God has done this maybe once or twice in Scripture. We have some examples of that. But that's God's prerogative. It's not ours. And the way we live in the new covenant is that we live realizing that there's no inherited guilt. You did not inherit the guilt of your father or your mother or your grandparents or your great-grandparents or anyone in your history. You did not inherit their guilt. And those who say that because of your race, you have inherited the guilt of those in the past, that is a lie. That is not the truth. That is not how God sees it. God sees it that you are guilty for your own sin. And so just be careful when people are trying to pass guilt on you because of what has happened in the past. It doesn't matter what they did. Your life is yours. Any sin you do, you're guilty for. Any righteousness you do, good you do, you're responsible for it. You do not inherit guilt. So just keep that in mind. Ezekiel 18 is the great passage concerning that. God does not deal with us on the basis of past sins of others that are in our family. He does not bring that along. And actually, the passage in Exodus chapter 20, that was all part of the old covenant. And when the new covenant comes, there's no passing on of guilt at all, even by God. We all inherit our own guilt by our own sin. And that's it. Thank you. This is Jim Brown.